Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Gas NZ Lunch and Learn. I'm Chase Hancock, the Principal Policy Advisor at Gas NZ. In today's webinar, we'll be covering developing a hydrogen market in New Zealand. First, a quick note on housekeeping. You'll notice your cameras and mics are disabled by default, but attendees can and are encouraged to post to the Q&As that we will address at the end of the presentation. Also, if time permitting, we'll also do a live question session where you'll be able to raise your hand and we'll enable you. I'll give more details on that later. But with that, let's get down to business. Today's speaker, Matt Carnachan, is co-founder of Head of Trading and Energy Markets at Hiringa Energy with over 10 years of experience in commodity and energy markets. Matt leads the commercial and trading side of Hiringa's green hydrogen supply chain from procurement and generation through optimization and supply to various offtake markets, including ammonia and heavy transport. With that, without further ado, welcome, Matt, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chase, and yes, New Zealand for having me on today and the opportunity to talk about hydrogen in New Zealand and some of the things Hiringa is doing, and thanks to everyone online for joining and your interest. I'll just quickly share my screen. I've got a quick presentation to go through, which will hopefully give you a bit of an overview of where hydrogen is starting to play a role here in New Zealand. The focus really is on what we've been doing as Hiringa. This presentation should take about 15 to 20 minutes, and then welcome any questions towards the end. I'm happy to chat after. So Hiringa Energy is a company focused on green hydrogen production. So we started back in 2017, 4 of us as co-founders, and we've quickly grown to a larger company of 25 people we have up in our offices in Taranaki. We also have an office over in Sydney where we're progressing some projects. Really, the genesis of Hiringa started the intention was to use hydrogen to decarbonize away from our fossil fuel industries. So many of the team that you see in the photo there, they come from a background in the energy industry. There's probably some familiar faces. So we have a wide range of skills, largely in developing large energy projects. We've been on a journey, I guess 2017 is a long time ago now, it seems, and decarbonisation was the ultimate reason for starting Hiringa. But through our journey over the last few years, there's been, I guess, some other benefits of hydrogen that have come to the forefront. We all experienced COVID back in 2019, and that really disrupted supply chains and made most nations look at their energy security. So, hydrogen is a fuel that we can produce domestically. We can take some independence away from our reliance on importing a large part of our diesel and New Zealand, which New Zealand industry relies on, and do it through both electricity and hydrogen. So what do we do as Hiringa? Well, we work throughout the whole energy supply chain, really. Hydrogen is ultimately produced from renewable electricity. So you run electricity through what we call an electrolyzer that splits water into its 2 elements of hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen's vented into the air and the hydrogen's captured to use in various downstream markets. So our focus is on the production and sale of green hydrogen, but you ultimately need to build the market as well. So we partner with the end market, ultimately the truck companies and also heavy industry. So I'll talk a bit more shortly on some further slides around what we're doing with the likes of the heavy transport industry, our partners TR Group there, and then also in the green ammonia industry. So our partners there are Balance Agri-Nutrients. we need a lot of electricity to produce hydrogen. So we're also building out a portfolio of green energy projects. We have a wind project in Taranaki where we're building 27 megawatts of renewable electricity. And we also just announced our partnership with My Farm, who's an investment partner in our solar projects, who are developing small scale solar. When I say small scale, we're talking 5 megawatts. So really, we're doing that so we can take control of our own electricity supply, use that to produce hydrogen, and then ultimately decarbonize industry towards the end. I think one of the major benefits to starting a new industry, I mean, there's a lot of challenges, but obviously we are starting from scratch. So we have been really conscious about how do we do this right and building the platform and systems to optimize how we produce hydrogen, how we sell it. And, the goal really is to do that at the lowest cost. The reason we need to do that is because hydrogen's only going to succeed if it can compete with the incumbent fuels such as diesel. So, we've been very focused on doing it right from the start. We don't let perfect get in the way of progress, but we're not, I guess, bogged down by some of the historic systems, etc., which you might see at the larger energy companies. So this slide here really focuses on where we see the opportunities for green hydrogen. So back in 2017, there was a real hype around hydrogen, and people were talking about it being the silver bullet potentially for solving some of the decarbonisation issues the world was facing. That's all well and good, but really when you're looking to commercialize a product, you need to focus on where there's price support and also volume support. So there's many solutions that hydrogen can ultimately be applied to, but our focus is on the ones where it has a competitive advantage over some of the other options. So you'll hear a lot about battery and battery electric versus hydrogen. We don't see it as a competing product. Really, it's a complementary product. Electricity and direct electrification ultimately has its place. But there are areas where electrifying use cases directly with electricity is very challenging, and that's where we see hydrogen playing an important role. So you can see at the bottom axis there is, the larger volumes for the downstream markets and the emissions impact. So really, we're looking to have the biggest impact on emissions reduction, but ultimately also have volume support for the product. And then where is the price support? So where can hydrogen compete commercially against the incumbent fuels? That's, as you see in the top left corner there, it's in the diesel market. So really where the electricity versus hydrogen does come into play is in that transport market. So light vehicles, direct electrification is a perfect solution, and probably many of you on the call today have an electric vehicle. You can charge it overnight at home. But once you get into that heavier end of the transport market where you have large trucks which need huge amounts of energy, they need to be on the road as much as possible. Electricity and direct electrification has its challenges. So hydrogen can be produced on site, it can be stored, and it can be delivered into those trucks in a really quick way. Whereas with direct electrification, that can be challenging due to the amount of electricity grid capacity you need, the timing of when these trucks need to charge, and also how long it takes to put that amount of energy into these large vehicles. Probably, I guess this is a Gas NZ forum, so a lot of you are probably interested in the process heat and the natural gas flame you see at the bottom of the graph there. Hydrogen is very challenging to make work commercially to displace natural gas. So you need about 8 kgs of hydrogen for every gigajoule of gas, which means you have to produce hydrogen at a cost that is just not achievable currently. So, where you might see it being injected into the pipeline, it'll be at small quantities, we think, over the next 2 to 3 years. It's once you build the scale of production and get those costs down, you can then start looking at putting the hydrogen into the gas network, etc. But there's biogas, etc. Probably you're going to see them more prevalent over the next few years going into the pipeline and displacing the methane that we use today. I think there's a session tomorrow with some of the industry partners talking about that. So hydrogen I guess, can be used in multiple end solutions. There's multiple pathways to commercialize hydrogen. This graph here really shows the process of it comes from renewable electricity. Again, you put that through an electrolyzer. You split the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and that hydrogen can then be used in multiple use cases. So, directly using the green hydrogen to decarbonize land transport, aviation, steel, chemical feedstocks, energy storage, and power generation. But also there's a much wider market that we're seeing developing around things like e-fuels. So, when you look at things like commercial scale air travel, electrification, again, direct electrification is challenging. The weight of the batteries, the amount of energy you need to fly a plane from New Zealand to the other side of the world is probably not possible in the near future. But what we see there is things like sustainable aviation fuel come into play, and so that sustainable aviation fuel needs hydrogen. So it really is a key element in decarbonising most of the industry that we see. So a little bit about our projects here, and this first project, we have two key projects here in New Zealand and a couple over in Australia. This first one is around our refueling network, where we're producing green hydrogen on site and supplying it into heavy transport. So again, we've gone through a journey here. It's great to be able to tell you today that we've got 3 stations up and running. There's a number of heavy trucks using those stations. So we're sort of entering that final stage of establishing our footprint. Beyond this year, we're looking to expand those stations. So we'll be building some down south and ultimately increasing the capacity at those. We do need to time it carefully though, because you can build all the production you like, but if there's not demand for that, then it's just going to sit there as a wasted asset. So, we are timing the rollout of these stations with the increased uptake in trucks, and we're seeing those trucks come onto our network now, and there's a few slides following this where you'll see that. So the 3 stations we have up and running are in Auckland, Hamilton, and Palmerston North. Our 4th station in Tauranga is currently under construction and should be complete towards the end of this month, early next month. So these are all based on all co-located with the Waitomo fuel station. So if you're in these regions, I welcome you to go have a look. You can see, there is some fencing around, so there's parts you can't go to, but it is operating fuel station, so you can go up, have a look at what's going on. I wouldn't encourage you to try fuel with hydrogen. These are set up specifically for the heavy trucks that we have on the market at the moment. There are a number of hydrogen cars, but ultimately these are really targeting fueling heavy transport. A bit of a closer look at what these stations do. So this is our station in Hamilton, in Te Rapa. We have an electrolyzer up in the top left corner there. So that's where the magic happens. That's where you put the electricity through and split the water. We currently have about 440 kgs of production at each site. But these, again, going back to that concept of, how do we be smart about rolling out this infrastructure? We've really built it in a cookie cutter manner so we can increase the production as demand for the product increases. You can see in the top right corner, that's where the heavy trucks fuel. So we've got a dispenser there. We've also got on-site storage. So we produce the fuel on site. We take electricity from the grid and store that fuel and then dispense it when it's needed by those trucks. So quite a unique model to what we're used to, where we're importing, currently importing our diesel and petrol from refineries in Asia, shipping it to this side of the world, where this model looks at it completely differently, where we can produce the fuel where it's needed and do that domestically. So this is just a look at some of those trucks that are currently operating on our network. There's a number of different companies with different trucks. So I guess the two main trucks we have are fuel cell electric trucks. These are essentially just electric trucks, but the electricity, rather than coming from a battery, comes from the hydrogen. So the hydrogen is actually run through a fuel cell, and that then generates the electricity to drive the electric motors. So these are 100% zero emissions trucks. The other solution that we're seeing become quite popular with the end users is dual fuel. So I guess similar to a hybrid electric vehicle where you've got petrol and electricity. With these ones, you have hydrogen and diesel. So that really de-risks some of that early technology risk for the end customers, where you can use hydrogen, but there's also the diesel option there. So we see these dual fuel trucks as a bit of a transition and helping, I guess, increase the uptake and scale up of hydrogen. But ultimately, the real benefit comes in these large fuel cell electric trucks. We can't do this alone, so we do need to partner, and we've had some really good partnerships throughout this journey of creating a hydrogen industry in New Zealand. Waitomo, as I mentioned, is where our refueling stations are located, and this, allows us to focus on the production and sale of green hydrogen without having to be a landowner, build fuel stations, all of that. So we've partnered with Waitomo on that side. That's not exclusive, so you will see our stations popping up independently and potentially on other sites. But Waitomo's been a great partner for unlocking these initial stages. And then on the market side, TR Group have really lent in. They're, I think, a leader globally in this space when it comes to decarbonising heavy transport. And they've purchased the trucks and they lease those. So TR Group is one of the biggest truck leasing companies in the country. They have a huge range of customers who ultimately want to decarbonise their logistics. They then lease these hydrogen trucks out to those customers. Again, it de-risks the technology side for these customers, because if for some reason a hydrogen truck doesn't work or isn't delivering the service it needs, it can quickly be swapped out for a diesel truck. So we're seeing great uptake and great feedback from the customers who are currently using these trucks on our network. I'll talk a little bit about just the electricity interaction and how we produce this, because this is, I think, really a unique feature of hydrogen. Those electrolyzers that I referred to earlier are extremely flexible, so it's not like some of the large demand in the energy sector that you see where it needs to be running 24/7. Electrolyzers are extremely dynamic and can be turned on and off within seconds. Um, this really is a benefit in decreasing the cost of production because those who are familiar with the electricity market will know that the price of electricity goes up and down, you know, minute by minute, depending on how much generation is available and how much demand is in the system. So what we can do with our hydrogen production is produce the hydrogen during times when electricity prices are low, i.e. there's not much demand in the system, so that's overnight, etc. We can store that electricity, we can store the electricity as hydrogen and then use it at a later date. Again, this is the whole reason that we need to do this and be smart and get the cost of production down is so that we can compete with the incumbent fuel, which is diesel. So finally, I'll talk about our project in Taranaki, which we have a partnership with Balance Agri-Nutrients. They are the largest fertilizer producer in New Zealand. They currently use hydrogen, which comes from natural gas. So the hydrogen they use at the moment is called grey hydrogen. It's from fossil fuel. They use a process called steam methane reforming, where essentially they take the hydrogen out of the methane and use that to ultimately produce ammonia and urea, and that's supplied to the customers around the country, the farmers. This is quite a good opportunity for green hydrogen because you can simply replace that grey hydrogen with green hydrogen. So the project here is we're building 24 megawatts or 25 of wind generation. That wind generation will supply the balance plant directly. So, they take some energy independence and green up their electricity supply from that wind generation. But we also use that wind generation to produce hydrogen and supply that hydrogen to balance to produce the ammonia and ultimately urea. The good thing, I guess, about this project is we have a lot of flexibility around where that wind production can go. So we also export it back to the electricity grid, and we can import green electricity from the grid and produce hydrogen for both transport and balance agri-nutrients. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm just going to quickly go rogue here. We haven't tried this in our in the technology side, so hopefully this works. And Brian and Ro are probably wondering what's going on here, but let me just share a quick video that I'll leave you with. Before we go to question time, I just wanted to play this as it probably summarizes.
All right, thank you for that, man. That was great, and the video did come through, so I guess it was a risk worth taking. Um, we've only got one question in the Q&A right now, so we'll open with that. The question from Brian seems to take longer than expected to refuel trucks, up to 15 to 20 minutes or so. Can you give us some insight on why that is, Matt?
Yeah, sure. So 15 to 20 minutes is the refueling time for the really heavy trucks. It's obviously putting in a lot more fuel than you do with a car. So comparing it, you fill up your car in a couple of minutes at the refueling station, but actually these these heavy trucks, if you're fueling them with diesel, take about 10 to 15 minutes. So, we are seeing pretty equivalent times to get that amount of energy into the equivalent truck. So yeah, the 15 to 20-minute fuel times are for a lot of fuel, and it is comparable to the current diesel trucks. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, that it sounds good to me. It's a volume issue. All right. Let's see. We've got one more from Prudvi. Is there government support for the project, and do road user charges apply for hydrogen fueled vehicles?
So yes, road user charges do apply. In terms of government support, so for our Kapuni project, we have some, I guess, low cost debt into that project. I think, you know, the New Zealand government has been very supportive, but we're not a country with deep pockets, and we don't, I think, give out grants easily. So if you compare what we're doing here to what we're doing in Australia, on the Australian projects, there's a lot more government support, but saying that the government has been supportive where they can be. We change government every 4 years in the worst case scenario, so that does shift. This current government, I think, has made it fairly clear that they're about removing barriers, largely regulatory barriers to getting businesses off the ground rather than providing financial support. So yeah, that's where we're currently at. I would say also there is through one of the government funds grants available for low emissions vehicles. So currently the hydrogen trucks cost more than a diesel truck. So there is an application process that truck purchasers can go through to be eligible for some help with that additional capex for a hydrogen truck. But that is limited, and it's not specifically applicable to hydrogen. It's for all low emissions vehicles.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great answer. I see that we are getting some questions, so we'll move into the live question section. It looks like we've got one from Alan. We'll bring you on. Alan, you'll need to unmute yourself and turn your camera on if you'd like us to see you. Oh, you're on mute, Alan.
Is that better? Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks for your presentation, Matt. That was a good talk. I was just wrote a question before. There's two big issues because we phase is decarbonising gas, and there was talk of using up to 20% of hydrogen to decarbonise natural gas over the next few years, and the targets to meet. This is a significant petajoule of hydrogen to inject into our network. How is the system you've got a regional and transportable, but would this be a centralised plant that we would be in a New Plymouth-based major event, or is it just a local injection process that you would have around all the gate stations?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess one of it is on the production side. How do you produce that much hydrogen? I think the other is how do you get it into the pipeline and use it. So there is some very small scale trials going on. First Gas have a small trial in the Horowhenua region where they are injecting low amounts of hydrogen into the pipeline. The theory is that you can get up to 15 to 20% without impacting the infrastructure that's connected to the gas pipeline and using the gas. So I think there's still quite a few challenges to get through to enable the demand side of that and have the confidence of putting that much gas. The production side, I think, to get that amount of electricity, you would need centralized production. So currently, we've got 1 megawatt of electrolysis at each of our sites, producing about 440 kgs per day. I think you need to times that by at least 1,000 or more if you're looking to get those quantities of gas into the pipeline. And once you start getting to that scale of production, transporting it around becomes expensive. So the next step in the technology there is like you see with LNG, is liquefying hydrogen, and you can move much more energy from large scale production facilities into the pipeline. I guess in New Zealand we've got a relative advantage where all our gas goes in Taranaki and gets shipped around. So having central production in Taranaki and injecting from there is probably where that would go. But our focus is on those commercial solutions, which initially are in transport and things like ammonia and potentially e-methanol. And then once you see scale up of those, then you got a lot more cost down of that hydrogen. You can start putting it in.
All right. Thank you for that question, Alan. It's a good question. Great answer as well. I guess we'll go back to the Q&A. We've got a few more questions trickling in. Question from Colin. What is the cost equivalent per litre of diesel?
There you go. That's better.
Yeah. Was there an answer? If there was, I think the sound might have cut out on my end.
I think I missed your question.
So okay. Yeah. The question from Colin was, what is the cost equivalent per litre of diesel?
So the cost, it's probably, you're looking at 50% more expensive if you use rough numbers. The sale price of our hydrogen is obviously commercially sensitive, and depends on the size of the contracts. If you've got a customer off taking lots for a long period, then you can get much closer to diesel equivalent. I think over the next 2 to 3 years, we're targeting cost parity with diesel, and then from there, the cost of hydrogen comes down and the cost of diesel goes up. So ultimately becoming cheaper within this decade, we see.
Nice. Got one more question. So what are the inspection requirements of the hydrogen tanks and cylinders?
Yeah, good question. And I probably should have said my background is in the commercial and electricity and gas trading side of things. So when it comes to technical specs, I'm not that well equipped to answer. I see. We have a lot more there.
Right. Thank you for that, Matt. I think, let's see, that's all the questions I have now. Are there any more live questions from the audience? Oh, there is a new post. There's one more in the Q&A. Let's see. The question is, are there any synergies with the methanol production plant in Taranaki?
Yeah, absolutely. So you probably saw on one of my slides, although I whipped through it a lot, there's a lot of information to take in. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant sometimes with the hydrogen industry. But yeah, e-methanol is certainly one of the products which hydrogen or green hydrogen can help with. So really the demand we're seeing, methanol is existing demand, but there's also a move for the shipping industry to move towards e-methanol as that decarbonizes. So yes, certainly with the Methanex plant in Taranaki, it's a huge advantage for New Zealand to have all that existing production, that existing supply chain for methanol, and you can simply, they use a lot of hydrogen currently, so turning that into green hydrogen rather than grey hydrogen is an opportunity we're working on. Again, it comes down to scale. So when you look at the refueling stations, it's very small scale production. You need sort of gigawatts of electricity to produce that sort of scale of production to displace the current methanol. But certainly an opportunity we're looking at, and there's no shortage of gigawatts of renewable electricity in New Zealand. We've just got to develop it.
Nice. It's good to hear. I think, let's see, are there any more questions from the floor? You can either post them to the Q&A, or if you would like to ask it live, just raise your hand. Well, Matt, people seem satisfied. So,
They're satisfied or confused.
Yeah. Oh, we've got one more. So spoke too soon. Okay, one from Matthew. How will you deal with dry year electricity shortages, high spot prices?
Yeah, really good question. So yeah, one of the biggest challenges in producing cost competitive hydrogen is the cost of electricity. And as you've suggested there, New Zealand's seen a huge increase in its cost of electricity, driven largely by gas shortages, volatility in the hydro storage. So what we are doing is really partnering or even developing ourselves the whole vertical integration of our own supply. So we're developing wind generation and solar generation. Obviously, we still need electricity when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. So dealing with dry year shortages is a challenge. But that's sort of part of our electricity strategy, and one that we're not unique in needing long-term affordable electricity. So it's sort of my role in the company as an extent energy trader to make sure that we can have a low-cost, stable supply of electricity. And yeah, I could go into the electricity market in detail, but that's probably not what we're here to talk about today.
All right. Thank you for that. Got a few more minutes. If there are any outstanding questions, please put them through. Otherwise, happy to wrap up what's been a great presentation. It looks like that might be it, but hey, thank you very much, Matt. We really enjoyed that, and thank you all for coming today. We will see you at the next installment of the Gas NZ Lunch and Learn series.
Thanks, Jace. Thanks, everybody.